My name's Ted Faye. I'm a film and video producer here in Los Angeles. In 2017, I was invited by these two guys, Dana Carl and Paul Dentzel, to a Christmas concert held by their mother, Elisabeth Waldo, at their rancho Cordillera. I'd heard about this woman, that she was an accomplished and published musician, a pioneer of the San Fernando Valley, and that her husband named the community of Northridge. At the very least, I thought it might be interesting to record her Christmas concert. And with her son's permission, I showed up, camera in hand. And it was there, for the first time, I met Elisabeth Waldo, or as her family calls her, the Maestra.
So we'll enjoy sharing this way of the sound, the music, the instruments, and where the heritage came from, starting with the Indian peoples, the Native Americans, the pre-Columbianos, and they're part of our show today, and I love to have this perpetuation in the music room.
We march along as we sing our joyful song till next year.
Shortly after, I was invited to the office, and there I saw the Maestra at work. Her son, Paul, is the family historian, while Dana Carl manages the business affairs. And over the next 2 years, we arranged meetings and interviews to tell the Maestra's story.
Really? In Canada, and she wants...
I know you got quite a bit of fan mail recently, I know.
From Switzerland.
It all started in rural Washington state. There were a lot of farms at the time, and the Waldos lived on a 40-acre ranch. Elisabeth was the daughter of Jane Althea Blodgett, a singer trained at the Boston Conservatory of Music, and Benjamin Franklin Waldo, a descendant of Ralph Waldo Emerson.
I was born in Tacoma, Washington, and lived the first up through the 8th grade next to the Yakima Indian Reservation.
And we went to watch some salmon fishing in the Yakima River. With their hands. The salmon would just come down and they pick them up like that. My father worked for the Northern Pacific Railroad, so he went to their tent and said, I have a daughter that wants to hear your music and meet you. Chief Saluskin's kids were Matilda and Ambrose, were my sister and brother, sitting in the classroom. So it wasn't difficult for me to be with Native Americans at all. Father worked for the Northern Pacific Railway, so every message he did was on the Morse code. A was dot dash, B was dot dot dash, things, the whole alphabet was Morse code.
That's how he directed trains from the East Coast to Chicago, and then Chicago, and everything way up into the Yakima Valley. Well, he was a frustrated musician. He didn't get to play the violin till he was in Vermont at about age 19 or something, and he would go and do the fiddle dances, but he didn't want to tell me where he was going. He'd go out the door with his fiddle and play for the square dances. And then when I was growing it up, he would hide it under the bed. He didn't want me to hear him practice. Mom was taught in the New England Conservatory of Music. She wanted to be a great opera singer. So when we always had a piano, and she said, "What note is that?" I'd say, "That's F." She would teach me a little scale before we could even find a string teacher. And she said, "I want you to sing this piece even if it's Christmas carols." And I said, "No, that's an F." And then she'd move on to another clef, and I'd say, "That's for the tenor or the bass clef, that's B flat." So she was always proud of that. One of her big possessions was a beautiful chest, big, just a chest, and it was maple wood or something, so she called a violin maker. Said, "Can you make a violin of this?" He said, "Yes, I can."
Elisabeth's mother wanted her daughter to have the best training available, so she enrolled her in Seattle's Cornish School of Music, named for Nellie Cornish, who felt it so important to train young musicians that she opened her doors in 1921. Jane took her daughter Elisabeth to violin lessons there faithfully.
Since my father worked for the Northern Pacific, we had free train trips, so my mom flagged the train, had just a little kerosene lamp. She'd flag the train, so all the train men knew me and say, "Come on, get on with your daughter," and then choo-choo, the train started up. Isn't that wonderful? I love that train whistle. I still hear it. Like an F sharp and a C sharp, probably. And in the engineer's place, you had to pull on a chain to make bells sound. You slept in the seat all night long, and you get up in the beautiful Northern Pacific Depot in Seattle, just beautiful. So we'd have our breakfast there. I used to love those big, what did they call them? These big things that are so rich and with lots of walnuts and sugar and huge, Busy Bee Cafe.
Through the Cornish School of Music, an audition was set up with none other than famed violinist Yasha Heifetz.
And they were in the Olympic Hotel in Seattle, which was famous, like you could see our biggest high-rises here. And my mom and I came on the streetcar and went up in the elevator scared. And Heifetz said, "Just turn your back to me." I said, "What?" He said, "Walk over there and turn your back." He didn't want me to watch the piano or see what note. He was testing me to see if I knew, was it treble clef, bass clef, soprano register, or what was the note. And they said, "Okay, now I'll listen to you play." Because of the great recommendation of Yasha Heifetz, I was accepted into the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia.
While Elisabeth was discovered by world-class musician Yasha Heifetz, her sister was found by a Hollywood legend.
Janet Waldo was discovered by Bing Crosby. See, he was from Spokane. They were very proud of him, everybody in the Yakima Valley in Seattle, because they figured he was the son of that, and he was doing so well. And he had a talent contest, and so my sister won the talent contest. And then he would give dinners, and then she would invite me, and that's where I got to know Bing. And then I was in his film score there, and the films in those days, 12 midnight or 2 in the morning, still playing. But he'd say, "It's awfully late for you to be out so late." "Well, Mr. Crosby, I love to play in this orchestra." He said, "Okay." Then here at that time, I had the pleasure of meeting Mickey Rooney. They would give these starlets little jobs, and she met him, and he said, "I want to date with you." She said, "Well, okay." And then she came home and told my mom and me, and I said, "Well, I want to meet him too." She said, "Will you open the door and tell him I'm putting on my makeup and I'll be ready in 5 or 10 minutes." So I said, "Welcome, Mickey. Hi, come on in." He said, "Well, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm a musician, and she's my baby sister, and she'll be ready in 10 minutes. And he was so big and wonderful. You know, yak, everything, if anything you can talk about. And she dated him. So he had his car waiting outside, and then finally she said, "Well, Mickey, I'm sorry, but anyway, I'm glad you got to meet my sister. She's a violinist."
And what a violinist she was. She caught the attention of none other than Leopold Stokovsky, renowned conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, who'd also recently completed the score and conducted the symphony for Walt Disney's Fantasia. Now he turned his attention to assembling the All-American Youth Orchestra for a tour of South America as part of Eleanor Roosevelt and the Roosevelt administration's Good Neighbor policy to encourage goodwill with South and Latin America. There were more than 15,000 applicants. He held more than 100 auditions, and only 90 were chosen.
He went in all of the United States and took kids from 18 through 25 who were interested in the symphonic world, and he happened to be here at CBS here, one of the studios, in line with other people to audition for him. And Stokovsky, great publicist idea man that he is, he got all the New York Fire Department and their trucks to get the 100 of us going all through New York City with alarms on and no traffic, and with Eleanor to meet us at the dock or in the ship.
The tour would be 3 weeks aboard the newly named SS Uruguay, stopping in South and Latin American cities, giving concerts.
The launch that she did, very wonderful. So the pictures with her son, herself, myself, and Stokovsky. Every day, our contract in the youth orchestra was to have a 4-hour rehearsal every day. And Stokovsky did it in the major dining room of the big ship. And the people, the other people that were on the ship, they'd come, and he hated them being on the window snapping pictures of everything, you know. Oh, wonderful. So we would use the swimming on the ship after we had our rehearsals and things like that. And the thing that Stokey did not like was somebody said, "Hey, Stokey, where's Garbo?" And it brought down the whole house yelling and screaming because he had just been all through Europe with the big Garbo thing in Italy and all around. It was so famous, I read about it in my teens.
Here, Queen of Glamour Greta Garbo is spending a holiday with Leopold Stokovsky, and that's news enough to set the world on tiptoe. Down in the village, our cameraman glimpsed the world-famous conductor hurrying away in his car.
It was that 3-week tour of South and Latin America that sparked the interest in the music of other cultures, the indigenous people, and the sounds of the Americas, ultimately luring her away from the classic composers.
Then, when I came back, they gave me a job in the LA Philharmonic. I had 1 or 2 years as one of the first violin section in the old LA Philharmonic Auditorium. Other Mrs. Leland Atherton Irish, she knew what kids were talented and arranged all of that. And I organized, and I said to Mrs. Irish, I have a chance to be a soloist in all of Latin America on my own. She said, I accept your resignation. Today, women are quite well accepted in many orchestras. Maybe half of an orchestra is women. It seems that girls had to have far greater discipline. When I was a student, you had to be better than a man or you were out. You had to be like a Heifetz or you were just not in at all. I just couldn't stay put. All these ideas began to combust. Even in movie studios, the recording orchestras are very static. If you have any ideas of your own, that's not the place to be. So I just took off and barnstormed all over Latin America. I grew up, of course, in the classic world of Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms. But when I would have the experience of seeing traditional ethnic instruments, I fell for it, and I resigned from the LA Phil so I could get opportunities to explore my dreams. Then I stayed there and made my own living. Did turn down all the possible boyfriends. I was too young and scared because that's a different approach over there. I met the director of the XCW of Mexico City. Fantastic. It goes all over Latin America, but only in Spanish, mostly. And I met Augustine Lara. Granada, da, 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 da. Great pianist of the world. He said, I don't use music, play this with me. I said, I have absolute pitch, I will. So I got working on XCW. So there were opportunities to play on with Augustine Lara. And the first time, walk on this big stage, all the lights go out. Nobody used music, and it was just on like this, watching this. But I went through it very well and played at the Teatro Lirico there with other Carmen Amaya, all the famous people of that period. But I was a single girl.
While Elisabeth would have many meaningful encounters and experiences in Mexico, it was her meeting with artist Diego Rivera that would help her focus and set her musical course for the rest of her life.
And so they said, he's painting on the Palacio, so why don't you come? And so we came. He was up on a ladder. Palacio de Arte there, all that beautiful frescoes of Diego Rivera. He was painting, so he said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm interested in the music, and I think I feel related to your art. He said, all right, you come out and visit my studio, bring your violin. So I got a taxi and went out to the studio. And he said, well, play something. So I started classic. I said, no, I'm here to learn mestizaje, meaning the combination of the classic with the ethnic styles they developed. He said, well, why are you here to see me? Because I said, I want to play music that sounds like what yours looks like. He said, all right, play for me then. Because I said, well, as you see, I play the Italian violin or the European violin, but I'm interested. He said, will you go and visit all our people? He invited me to go to the market, play El Mercado. And that's the biggest thing in all of Mexico City. Huge, from all the provinces, the veggies, everything. And that's where I got interested in
buying the folk instruments. And I could see indigenous violins. I could see people with no European training playing the violin or the guitar. They all made their own little guitars, vihuela, charangos, all different instruments, not European. So I said, well, how are they playing that? Where does it come from? And it just made me get out of Glockenbrahms. And that's where I am today. I have always wondered, what was the first music of the Americas? The pre-Hispanic, pre-Cortez, pre-Columbian peoples had no musical notation. I just had to start from scratch, imagining what it might be. From these three resource areas, Indo, Hispanic, and Afro, you get a totally different sonic picture. When I lived and studied ethnic music at a girls' school in Panama, I heard drums going all night long and loved it. Right away, my vision of doing a conservative opus just went right out the window, because you hear this cacophony of sound and become very excited.
In fact, it seems that the very tapestry of the Maestra's life is woven through and through with Latin American threads. It was in Panama that she met a young lawyer who introduced her to his brother Carl, who eventually became her husband. Her knowledge of indigenous Latin American and Southwest Indian music garnered the attention of renowned musicians. William Grant Still sought her out to create Danzas de Panama, which is performed to this day. She toured with Yma Sumac, the Peruvian soprano who had a 4.5 octave range and that Hollywood fell in love with. But it would be jazz record producer Gene Norman who would introduce Elizabeth to her widest audience. When he produced Rites of the Pagan, he wrote, "Working with Miss Waldo has been a revelation. Her dedication to creating an exact replica of the musical culture of an intriguing chapter of human history qualifies her as a musical historian of front rank. She has an important contribution to make in terms of cultural history, in terms of a new world of sounds that originate with her unique instruments, and in terms of the sheer pleasure of enjoyment of fascinating music." Gene Norman understood mestizaje, the fusion of the sounds of indigenous and classical, of ancient and modern. In 1976, Los Angeles Public Television KCET producer Ed Moreno filmed one of the Maestra's concerts from the San Gabriel Mission in San Gabriel, California. When Diego Rivera had encouraged the young Elizabeth to go into the marketplace and see the instruments played there, he likely never dreamed that the young lady's passion would result in the preservation and presentation of those very ancient instruments to the world.
From this historic place, we bring you a special musical presentation by Elisabeth Waldo. Now, this work is the result of extensive research and experimentation by the composer, Miss Waldo, who, as an ethnomusicologist, has chosen pre-Hispanic and Latin American cultures as her realm of music.
I would like to introduce some of the instruments to you, and let's listen to their unique sound. First, the flutes, flautas de barro, or tlapichali by their Indian name. Pitos. And the unique ocarinas. And now, in the percussion family, the teponashli, sacred slit drum, and its accompanying drum, the huehueto. Adding to that, the omichikawashli, or the human bone rasp. And of course, the mestizo stringed instruments, the charango, and the tiple.
In the late 1970s, I traveled to China and developed an interest in Asian music, and made after that several trips again. I debuted an orchestral suite at the Pacific Asia Museum in Pasadena called Tales of the Golden Mountain, using exotic instruments from China and combined them with my Western instruments. I spent at least a year alone researching old Cantonese music for my score for Tales of the Golden Mountain. Then I was able to incorporate some ancient chants as well. Now I'm working with a fabulous corps of musicians who play both the traditional and ethnic instruments. To create Catalina, Treasure of the Past, I went to the Channel Islands where there are petroglyphs and worked with the Chumash people. My creative center is right in California, and a lot of what I do stems from the California heritage, which includes Indo, Hispanic, and Chinese influences. When people hear my soundscapes, sometimes they say that they feel transported into another world and are sorry when it ends because they feel something is missing right now in this world.
Moonlight become you, I'm thrilled at the sight.
The discovery of Elizabeth's sister Janet by Bing Crosby also opened up the doors to Hollywood for Elizabeth herself. After she played in the orchestra on several of Bing's films, other filmmakers heard of her work. Composers like Maurice Jarre and Lalo Schifrin asked her to play in their film score compositions. For over 60 years, she played for some of Hollywood's greatest composers, as she was sought out for the unusual sounds she created with her traditional instruments, as well as for her artful skill on the violin. One of the most memorable was Dr. Zhivago. Elizabeth was not content to just perform. She wanted to share her knowledge with young people. Beginning in the 1970s and into the early 21st century, she taught in a variety of venues. There was UCLA and Cal State LA, and some of her most rewarding teaching was with younger students. She taught with groups like Performing Tree and Young Audiences, where children from elementary to high school age often showed their appreciation for their teacher's enthusiasm, knowledge, and skill. Elizabeth continued her work over the years. She toured with Xavier Cugat, whose larger-than-life musical career helped spread Latin music throughout the country. In a historical pageant called The California Story, she worked with Meredith Willson, whose Music Man would soon become a hit Broadway musical and feature film. She led a Pan-Asian musical ensemble during the 1984 Olympics and was honored with an award as a Pioneer Woman of Los Angeles in 2006.
My dream has been to create original material, to create music that nobody else would take the time to go through the pain to create. So I do feel rewarded, and I don't regret it at all.
so it all comes back to that Christmas concert. I thought I was just going to shoot a little and create a short keepsake for the family. But at the end of the concert, it was her son, Dana Carl, who spoke, putting her life in perspective, allowing us to all understand what her contributions had been.
For me, this program is really a celebration of the work of Maestra Elisabeth Waldo. She introduced the use of pre-Columbian instruments in recording studios, and her compositions went a long way to creating a new genre of music called New Age music. And you know what? Her work is only now coming into its own. And she's not stopping.
No way. Can I please have your autograph? Just reading this letter is very appreciated. Thank you for your time. Wishing you all the best. You're still making many performances. Isn't that wonderful?
Elisabeth Waldo, for all intents and purposes, is a missionary, an ambassador for musical integration, where generations of music and the souls of the ancients are bound in harmony to the modern, and both pass through the heart of one passionate artist, Elisabeth Waldo, the Maestra.
What a beautiful and talented lady you are.